this is just a really, really short, small segment, 5 or 10 minutes I just want to talk to you about. Scott Rosenberg posted this. I don't know where I picked this up. I posted it on our Facebook page because what he says here, and I think is really, really valuable. Like at the beginning, we're all talking about the sustainability issue and the business issue. What's your business plan? How are you going to make money? How are you going to sustain this? How are you going to set this up? But there are other things at the beginning that are important to think about because they're hard to undo. And I speak here from a position of experience, and that is the tone that you set for the commenting in the community in the site. So when BaristaNet started, 2004, there had been something called the Montclair Water Cooler, which was a Yahoo group at the time. I guess still is, but they also have it on Facebook now. And it was very tightly managed by this group of administrators called the Benevolent Despots, and they if you weren't from Montclair, you'd be your comment wouldn't go through. If you mentioned a business, your comment wouldn't go through. They were really, really tough. So we came out of that environment and we were early. We didn't have any experience with the idea of trolls and the kind of muck that can come on a news site. So our philosophy at the time was anonymous comments, all come. You didn't even have to register anything, right? And when we got a barroom brawl as a sort of ongoing everyday thing, it became very hard to manage, and you can't go back. It's very, very hard to go back. And what would happen? And Annette,
it was a negative publicity.
And it was, as Annette, our champion saleswoman, would say, yeah, it would be hard. There were other people who would like our content, who would like, who wouldn't, or who would just say, oh, BaristaNet is a gossip site, BaristaNet is a negative site, even though we would be doing positive journalism, and made it hard for her to sell. And it made it hard for people to stomach. Now, Scott says in this piece, some news sites will say, and there is a benefit to this. I mean, I used to say in presentations that, because sometimes they could be charming, these trolls, that it would be like, in Seinfeld, where Jerry would be sitting in his living room, and all of a sudden Kramer would come in, and all these different people would come in the room, and that was the conversation. And certainly that community and building an early community of characters and personalities has given us a lot of traffic, gave us a ton of traffic and a sense of ownership of the site. But there's so much negative that went with it and has gone with it, and so what I encourage you to read this story, read the links from this story, read the comments on this story, and really think about it. And this can be definitely something that we can talk about in peer-to-peer. There are some people that say that Facebook commenting is better because it does come with a name. You get some traffic along with it. And there was a study, and one of the links that I got to from this article, that newspapers that had adopted it actually had much more civil. There was actually sort of an A/B test with that, on one site where you could see that the Facebook comments on the same story were much, much more civil. In the end, you may have to pay somebody to moderate your site, or you may have to do it yourself as the owner. I know that New Haven Independent, who runs a really good site as a nonprofit, but they made it a part of their mission from day one that they moderate every comment ahead of time, which is not as usual, not as typical for most of us, and they have kept their conversation very civil. But there was a point where about a year ago it got so bad that they just got disgusted and just stopped taking comments for about a week while they weren't sure that they were going to do it at all. But you may end up so early stage. I went on Mary's site just to see early stage site. She uses Facebook commenting. I don't even know if there were any comments yet. Maybe there are a few. Are you Mary Sales?
I am.
Oh, hi, hey, good to meet you. But it's so early stage. You don't have anything to worry about yet. but it's a really good time, and particularly in your case, when you're going to be competing in a way with Maplewood Online, which is a free-for-all site. And so that may be for you a way to establish a different identity. So whereas Baristanet was an alternative to the very uptight, difficult water cooler that was so restrictive, over in Maplewood, where there's a free-for-all site, being a responsible, civic-minded kind of site that watches its comments closely, and so you do have some control over it. You can take comments down. You can and should have a commenting policy. You can say what you want to see. That you can attack people's ideas, but you can't attack people. You can say, there were certain things that were really easy to decide to take down, but there were times, and it's pathetic. I mean, that's one of the things that people debate in this particular comment is whether a community really ever forms around a local geography, or whether it's really just a mob, and the incredibly awful comments that would come on a story about like a kid being killed or dying or somebody. I mean, it would just shock you, right? I mean, I remember Arlene Linetsky, who died crossing the street, or got hit by a car crossing the street, and before she was even dead, was like, well, she crossed the street in the rain at night. She got what she deserved, or I mean, you just don't need comments like that. There's no excuse for it. Yes.
So I'm not going to have comments on my site at all. And the reason I've decided this is not only from Pat's experience, but also from seeing what happens on other sites. My thinking is you don't have to, because if you want people who want to engage beyond whatever it is, they can write a letter to the editor and you can run an op-ed, but it forces them to compose their thoughts a little bit and it slows down that reaction process. Now, I'm not at the point where I have enough people, I'm sure, following on Facebook where I would have to moderate some of that stuff, but the thing that I always found that was really interesting was that when you would converse with people or delete unwanted comments, they would try and invoke the First Amendment.
Oh, yes.
Which was hilarious. First Amendment means you can start your own site.
Yeah. Right. And there is a trend these days in people not running comments, and if you're doing it as a deliberate strategy, it's a good one to consider. You can consider not having comments. But I do suggest you go through this whole thing. One of the things that comments do occasionally do is add news to the story, and two interesting things along that line. Often, when there is a breaking emergency news story, a heat day with 100+ degrees temperatures and all the electricity is off and where are the cooling centers or stuff like that, people will crowdsource in a way on the comments that is useful. Now now we have Facebook and Twitter, and so you could use your Facebook page for that kind of crowdsourcing instead of comments page. And then if people are all talking garbage on Facebook, well, at least it's not on your site what you're trying to sell. So that's an option. So you sometimes get some really good intelligence, but it's worth considering that. It's certainly less trouble.
To bring up Andrew Sullivan again, he's never had comments on his site, but still managed to build community by having the views from your window and reader comments that he's published on his own. It still happens, or he manages to have some sense of a community behind his site. I've been that for 10 years.
Yeah.
I was covering a municipality for, or might as well say, at the Alternative Press. They had a whole Sussex County site. You don't want to know. Don't want to know what happened to that. That's okay. But I would walk in and the mayor would go, "Well, thank God it's you, not Pat," at the top of her lungs. Like I would, you get a round of applause from council because the Alternative Press allowed comments, but you had to sign your name. It was like a letter to the editor. I mean, I don't think anybody ever called and checked. You had to put your name. In your name, but and it was just it was like a breath of fresh air to them. Somebody covering their town that wasn't allowed.
But it can be moderated. I mean, the New York Times obviously has some money to put into it, but they moderate it, and WNYC moderates comments and so forth. So I mean, it can be moderated. Wait, Heidi first, and then.
Just in regards to having Facebook as and for comments and saying that is not going to solve all your problems. Right now, my focus had been towards Facebook, just simply because it was one of those things easy to do, and I have full-time jobs, so that's not something that I did that often. But I actually had to moderate a fight that broke out on Facebook because someone wasn't happy who won the holiday house decorating contest. We were calling each other names, and it got to the point, and these were people using their real names. So it's probably will stop a lot of it, but it's definitely not.
Well, and that's,
Stop all of it.
yes, and that's his point. Forget anonymity. It's moderation. It's management. It's not, anonymity doesn't do the whole thing.
Right, and that's why I took it off, and I posted why I took it off. I didn't remove it, I just hid it from my wall. So if they actually were to search for it, it would still pop up, but
I will, as a related thread to this, tell you that if you ever write something about high school kids that is negative, you will get the worst possible comments in the world. And in addition to that, even in a very high-achieving town, they will be illiterate as well as mean. And if you're as lucky as I am, you might get a Facebook group that's called I absolutely hate Debbie Galant. But I will tell you this, that if you are at the stage in a family where you have children who are going into middle school, high school, and everything, and have had to endure that, all those comments, both in the school hall and online, it does make a very good college essay. And it isn't bad for a child to grow up in a publishing family and learn the power of sticking with your guns about something. But anyway, it's just.
I'll say to the point of moderation, I had to moderate a site before that had a lot of commenting on it, and if you do have a comment policy, which I think is crucial, it's very easy then when you take people's comments down to know why, and to cite it, and it becomes not a personal thing, it
Right.
becomes a product of, just like being protected from libel, you're also being protected, like, look, this is the policy you signed on for when you commented.
But especially if you do it at the beginning, because if we tried to do that now on BaristaNet, all the people that they feel like it's their site as much as it's the owner's site, and they get furious. And what they would do was, I remember we figured out a way to put somebody in timeout for a week. We just put literally timeout for a week. And so what they did to punish us, and this was early days of Patch, was to go over to Patch and start commenting away and like, I'm over at Patch, and Oliver, you can come watch me at Patch. They just wanted to punish. Josh?
Yeah, that reminds me, putting them in timeout reminds me of Ken Friedman at WFMU talks about troll whispering.
oh yes.
And how he actually really resists taking comments down and blocking people, but he actually really goes and engages them one-on-one behind the scenes.
I have done that too, and that has been.
It worked really well for him.
It does, because then you're doing it without an audience.
Right.
And the thing that a troll wants is an audience. And so I have done that before with some of our most difficult commenters and said, hey, I'll send them an email and I'll say, hey, you know what, I want to do this away from everybody else, but please, I think you've stepped over a line there. And usually even the most, I never called it troll whispering, it's a great term, but it really was effective. Most of them, could respect that. So it was really weird. They could respect me on email as a person, and very funny. I still see from time to time Cathar now, who was my biggest enemy. I mean, I had a dream one time, an actual dream at night, that I was murdered by the chief's troll on our site, who actually murdered me by smothering me with a pillow. And now that I've been off the site for 2 years, he'll come on and say, gee, the site sure isn't like it was in the days when Ms. Galant was in charge, which, I was the worst person in the world when I was in charge. It's very funny. Anyway, this is a topic that lots of people have lots of stuff to talk about, and we can talk about it in the peer-to-peers and all kinds of things. We can do a workshop on it. I just wanted to say early on, set your tone, make your decisions, pay attention to what's happening, and if you see a problem, start addressing it now. If you need some help on how to address it, if you're part of the grants, you can talk to Joe. If not, you can reach out to me and to your peers, and which is why we're all here working, helping each other. So that's my message. Thank you.
I would definitely encourage, if you haven't read it, read that article, and think about, the thing I would also, I mean, I think it's tempting to not do comments, and I don't want to disagree with that, because everybody knows I don't disagree with whatever you want to do. But I think you need to be thinking about what's your engagement strategy for your community. And just, if you were to go down the road of saying, I'm not going to have comments, think about, okay, I'm not going to have comments, what else am I going to be doing for engagement? I may have to overcompensate on something else because I'm not going to have comments. But that's, I would just be careful, because it's kind of an easy engagement, beginning an engagement strategy is comments moderated properly. But if you're not going to do comments, what else are you going to do?
And Josh is going to talk to us a little bit about events and using events as a strategy. And while I think we may be thinking more along the lines of revenue, maybe not, there are sites, I believe Oakland Local and other sites, who use events on a regular basis as a way of engaging their communities. So they'll have a coffee at Starbucks or at some local coffee shop, some indie coffee shop, once a month or something like that, and as a way of engaging. So, you know, there are ways around the comments and everything, and I believe me, I understand it. So now we're going to get into sales. So we're going to bring our sales panel up here, which is, I'm going to...